Shalom, I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you regarding the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, and it is as follows. For the first time since the April 29th collapse of peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians, U.S. President Barack Obama has directly blamed Israel for the failure of negotiations. According to a White House official, each time we arrived at a crossroads, another new settlement construction announcement was made. It was like putting a stick on the wheels. The official also said Obama still believes that another round of talks is possible during his presidency, but that for the time being, the president prefers to sit back and let the sides ask themselves for an American mediation. Reports indicate that it was U.S. President Barack Obama who was the unnamed source quoted in an interview with an Israeli newspaper on May the 2nd who blamed Israel's building and settlements for the collapse of the peace talks. In the interview, the unnamed source said, "The Jewish people are supposed to be smart. It is true that they're also considered a stubborn nation. You're supposed to know how to read the map. In the 21st century, the world will not keep tolerating the Israeli occupation. The occupation threatens Israel's status in the world and threatens Israel as a Jewish state." A senior administration official said that the White House cleared the interview and that the critical remarks faithfully reflected U.S. President Barack Obama's own views. In a possible agreement to extend peace talks past April the 29th, Israel reportedly was willing to implement a partial settlement freeze in the West Bank. Israel Deputy Defense Minister Danny Danon said that there was a silent freeze on planning for further Jewish settlement expansion. While construction work is currently taking place on already approved projects, no new developments are planned and no tenders and bids are being issued, he said. "I don't know of a formal policy to limit building, but when you look at the situation, de facto, what's happening on the ground, yes, you feel that there is a silent freeze in terms of planning and in terms of government construction," Danon said, "and that's something that bothers me. This freeze is being enforced everywhere, within and outside the so-called settlement blocks," he said. Danon said that he wasn't sure why the government would agree to quietly freeze settlement expansion, suggesting that pressure from the United States might be behind it. "Building in the West Bank is a major issue for the United States," he said. "The United States is putting a lot of pressure on Israel." Dani Dayan of the Yesha Council of Jewish Communities in the West Bank backed Danon's claim of a silent settlement freeze, saying, "For the last 3 months, the Planning Committee of the civil administration in charge of building has not met even one time," he said. "Plans for new buildings were not advanced 1 inch, let alone approved. There are no new tenders at all," he said. "As far as we know, this is because of a direct order from the Prime Minister's office," Dayan charged, adding that he assumes that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was intimidated by threats from the White House or the U.S. State Department. A new Palestinian consensus government to be named by the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Hamas is to be finalized within days, a senior Hamas official said. Bassem Naim, an advisor to Hamas's premier in the Gaza Strip, Ismail Haniyeh, said a senior member of Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah movement would meet with Hamas officials in Gaza this week to conclude negotiations. "We expect the government to be announced by Abbas early the following week," he said. Musa Abu Marzouk, head of the Hamas negotiating team, said the talks would be finalized next week and a unity government would be announced shortly afterward. All candidates proposed for the Palestinian unity government will be politically impartial, Fatah official Fayez Abu Atiyah said. The formation of a proposed unity cabinet is nearly complete, according to Hamas spokesman Sami Abu Zuri. Speaking in Gaza's Al-Amri Mosque, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh announced that in the coming days the temporary leadership of the PLO will meet in the Egyptian capital of Cairo. Haniyeh said that according to the unity deal with Fatah, Hamas, along with Islamic Jihad would be integrated in the PLO leadership and take part in elections for Palestinian institutions. Islamic Jihad has never renounced violence against Israel. According to the Hamas-Fatah Unity Agreement, which was announced at the end of April, Abbas will announce the dates for elections, and Fatah and Hamas will form a unity government. If Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas tears up his pact with Hamas, then it will open the way for somehow resuming the peace negotiations with Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said. Netanyahu said that while Palestinian national unity for peace is good, a pact with Hamas which openly calls for Israel's destruction and practices terror against the Jewish people, that's bad. The Prime Minister said that he was asked by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry whether he would make a peace agreement with a Palestinian Authority that doesn't govern all the Palestinian people, adding that, "I said yes, because I will make peace with that part of the Palestinian people that is prepared to live in peace with the State of Israel. If Abbas establishes a government of national unity, and if Hamas continues to fire rockets at Israel, then we'll have to hold President Mahmoud Abbas responsible. It just doesn't make sense for him to make this pact with Hamas if he genuinely wants peace with Israel." Asked what would happen if Hamas accepted the quartet's conditions for engagement and renounce terrorism, recognize Israel, and accept previous agreements, the quartet consisting of the United Nations, the European Union, the United States, and Russia, Netanyahu said that would obviously be an entirely different situation, but unfortunately I don't see it happening. They're very ideological, very militant, and very extreme, and they show no signs of such change. Meanwhile, Abbas was hoping to persuade the U.S. administration to accept a Palestinian unity government that would be established in accordance with last month's reconciliation deal between Fatah and Hamas. Abbas planned to make it clear to Kerry that the proposed government would recognize Israel and reject violence, a senior Palestinian official said. Noting that this was the first meeting between Kerry and Abbas since the breakdown of the U.S.-sponsored Israeli-Palestinian peace talks, the official said that the new government would report directly to the Palestinian president and would not deal with issues related to the peace process. There's no reason why the Americans should oppose the unity government, because it would consist of independent figures and technocrats, the official said. The government would serve for a limited period of 6 months, and its responsibilities would be restricted to day-to-day affairs of the Palestinian public. President Abbas and the PLO are the only ones entitled to conduct peace talks with Israel, he added. Another Palestinian official said that he was optimistic that the U.S. administration would not stand against the Hamas-Fatah deal. The official said that the Palestinian leadership had succeeded in convincing some top members of the U.S. administration that the rapprochement between Hamas and Fatah would not have a negative impact on the peace process. Fatah spokesman Fayez Abu Atta told reporters the government would consist of independent figures with no political affiliations so as not to give Israel or the United States an excuse to boycott the Palestinian Authority. In a sign of cooperation between Fatah and Hamas, only 2 weeks after signing a reconciliation deal, the Hamas daily newspaper was distributed in the West Bank and East Jerusalem for the first time in 7 years. The Palestinian Authority government approved the distribution of Palestine as part of efforts to promote unity between the two Palestinian factions. The move followed a decision by the Hamas government in Gaza to allow 3 newspapers published in the Palestinian Authority to be distributed in the Gaza Strip. Hamas leader Khaled Mashal said that despite his group's reconciliation efforts with Fatah, Hamas was still committed to resistance against Israel. "We have turned the page on division between Hamas and Fatah. Hamas has already made sacrifices, and this was necessary to be closer with our brothers. But with the invader, we will not make any compromises," referring to Israel, said Mashal. "I'm aware that many real challenges lay ahead. We can overcome them," he added, referring to the April 23rd agreement, which calls for a unity government to be formed between Hamas and Fatah. The reconciliation does not mean an end to Palestinian resistance against the invaders. Resistance will continue as long as the occupation exists, insisted Mashal. Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas thinks that Hamas does not need to recognize Israel or renounce terrorism even after the unity pact with his Fatah movement. Recently, Abbas had a conversation with U.S. National Security Advisor Susan Rice. During the conversation, Abbas told Rice that Hamas will not be a part of the new unity government, nor will that government include representatives of other Palestinian Arab organizations. Rather, the official said, it will be made up of independent professionals who are politically unaffiliated. Abbas also reportedly told Rice that he will head the new unity government and that this government will adopt his political platform, which renounces violence. Rice told Abbas during their meeting that any Palestinian government must unambiguously and explicitly commit to nonviolence, recognition of the State of Israel, and acceptance of previous agreements and obligations between the parties. Meanwhile, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that the Palestinian Authority will be held responsible for violence that comes from Hamas in the Gaza Strip as a part of any unity deal. Hamas is committed to Israel's destruction. We remain committed to advancing the peace process, preferably a negotiated peace. But we can only negotiate with the government whose constituent parts are committed to peace, said Netanyahu. He added that as long as Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas remains committed to the unity deal with Hamas, a terror organization that regularly fires rockets into Israel, then Israel will have to hold him accountable for every rocket that is fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel. European Union Ambassador to Israel Lars Fauberg Anderson said that he didn't feel peace talks should have been stopped last month over the unity deal between Fatah and the terrorist group Hamas. I don't see a reason for the peace talks stopping in order to send a message that there's a difference between Fatah and Hamas, said Fauberg Anderson. Ironically, Hamas is on the European Union's official list of terror organizations. Israel Justice Minister Tzipi Livni, who is in charge of negotiations with the Palestinians, met privately in London with Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas. In the meeting, Livni expressed to Abbas Israel's dissatisfaction with the unity pact he reached with Hamas. The meeting was the first between Abbas and a senior Israeli official since Israel pulled out of the peace talks in response to the Hamas-Fatah unity pact. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was informed in advance about the meeting and was unhappy about it. He said that Livni was only representing herself and not the Israeli government. Netanyahu reiterated that the position of the government, as passed unanimously by the Security Cabinet, is not to negotiate with the Palestinian government that includes Hamas, which he restated is a terrorist organization that declares its intentions to destroy the State of Israel. Livni defended her decision to meet Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas, saying, "I would like to remind everyone that the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians isn't over. We are still here and the Palestinians are still here. Our interest is to resolve the conflict, and ignoring reality is not an option. Ignoring the other side, not listening or talking, is irresponsible," Livni insisted. "A resolution is best achieved through direct negotiations, but we can't ignore the agreement between Hamas and Fatah. To all those politicians up in arms over the fact that I met with Abbas in London, I want to be clear. We'll continue doing what we believe in, and that's what I did last week by meeting with Abbas," Livni said. Finally, Israel Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman said that the impasse in peace talks with the Palestinians was likely to continue. As of now, the impasse in negotiations with the Palestinians is expected to continue, Lieberman said. He accused Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas of having no interest in reaching a deal with Israel, no matter what Israel offers him, noting past proposals of Israeli land concessions Abbas had turned down. He reiterated the Israeli stance of no negotiations with the Palestinian Unity Government so long as Hamas does not accept the quartet's conditions of recognizing Israel, rejecting violence, and abiding by existing agreements. Well, that's going to conclude this week's report, where we shared with you regarding the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.